600,000 people, trapped between the sea and the most brutal military force ever assembled. Egypt's war machine, chariots, archers, infantry divisions, trained to crush rebellions without mercy, closing in for total annihilation. This wasn't a battle. This was an execution, except the sea moved. And in one impossible moment, the rules of survival were rewritten. The ancient world's greatest superpower watched their elite forces drown in walls of water that should never have existed. This is the untold truth behind the most terrifying escape in history. Egypt wasn't just powerful, it was engineered for domination. Pharaoh's military was a machine built on three pillars: speed, discipline, and overwhelming force. Chariot divisions that could cover 30 miles in a single day. Archers trained from childhood to fire volleys so dense they blotted out the sun. Infantry formations that moved as a single organism, crushing everything in their path. This was the empire that controlled the ancient world's most valuable resource, the Nile, and used that wealth to fund a military apparatus that had never lost a major campaign. And now that entire apparatus was mobilized for one purpose: recapture the Israelites. The Israelites were not warriors. They were slaves, families, children, a massive, slow-moving column of refugees stretching for miles, burdened with livestock, carts, and everything they owned. Zero combat training, zero weapons, zero chance. They had been moving for days, following Moses through the wilderness, when they reached the edge of the sea. And that's when they realized the trap. Mountains hemmed them in on both sides. Sheer cliffs that couldn't be climbed, especially not by hundreds of thousands of people with children and animals. The sea stretched out ahead, an impossible barrier with no boats, no rafts, no way across. And behind them, the dust cloud. Egypt's chariot divisions closing the gap. The sound came first, a low rumble that grew into thunder. The pounding of hooves, the rattle of wheels on stone, the rhythmic march of thousands of soldiers moving in perfect formation. Pharaoh didn't just want them dead, he wanted them to know they were about to die. This was psychological warfare at its most brutal. The Israelites could see the chariots now, glinting in the sun. They could count the divisions. They could calculate how long they had left. Minutes, maybe an hour. Moses stood at the edge of the sea, facing a crowd that was starting to panic. Some were screaming at him. Others were preparing to surrender. A few were suggesting they fight, even though they had nothing to fight with. The military reality was simple. Egypt's fastest units would hit them first, scattering the column and cutting off any organized retreat. The chariots would run down anyone who tried to flee into the mountains. The infantry would finish the rest. There was no strategy, no clever maneuver, no last-minute alliance riding over the hill. Just a promise from God that most of his people were starting to doubt. And then, in the final hour before impact, the sea began to move. A wind rose, not a gentle breeze, but something unnatural. A roaring gale that seemed to come from nowhere, focused entirely on the water ahead. The Israelites watched as the surface began to churn. Waves pushed back, water displaced, and a path opened. The wind didn't just blow, it carved. A corridor of dry ground appeared where there should have been drowning depths. Not gradually, instantly, as if an invisible blade had sliced through the sea and held the water in place by sheer force. Walls of water rose on both sides, towering, trembling, defying every law of nature the ancient world understood. The Israelites stared at the path. Some fell to their knees, others refused to move, convinced the walls would collapse the moment they stepped forward. But Moses didn't hesitate. He walked into the corridor first, his staff raised, and the people followed. 600,000 people moving between liquid walls that could crush them in seconds. The ground beneath their feet was dry, not damp, not muddy, dry, as if the sea had never been there. Children ran ahead. Livestock stumbled forward. Carts rolled through what should have been the bottom of the ocean, and behind them, Egypt's army reached the shore. Pharaoh's commanders saw the path. They saw the walls. They saw the Israelites escaping through an impossible corridor. And they made the call, pursue. This is the detail that reveals everything about Egypt's mindset. They didn't see a miracle. They saw a trick, a natural phenomenon they didn't understand yet, but one they could exploit. Their gods were stronger. Their destiny was unstoppable. If the sea had opened for slaves, it would hold for Egypt's elite forces. The chariots entered the seabed. Wheels rolled across dry ground. Horses galloped between the walls. Infantry divisions followed, confident they would catch the Israelites before they reached the other side. But the walls were already shifting. The water trembled. Cracks appeared in the liquid barriers. The wind that had held them in place began to die. The Israelites were still crossing, thousands of them, moving as fast as they could, but weighed down by families and possessions in sheer terror. Egypt's fastest chariots were gaining. The gap was closing. Archers were preparing to fire. And then the last Israelite reached the far shore. The walls fell, not gradually, not with warning, instantly. The entire Egyptian force, chariots, horses, soldiers, commanders, swallowed in seconds. The water didn't just collapse, it crushed. Waves higher than buildings slammed together with the force of a mountain falling. The sound alone was enough to stop the Israelites in their tracks. They turned and watched as the sea consumed the army that had been seconds away from killing them. When the water settled, there was nothing. No survivors. No wreckage floating to the surface. Just the sea, calm and undisturbed, as if Egypt's war machine had never existed. What Egypt lost that day wasn't just an army. It was their invincibility. Egypt's silence is the most telling part of the story. The most documented civilization in history, the empire that carved records into every temple wall, that boasted about every victory, every conquest, every campaign, went completely quiet about this disaster. No monuments, no inscriptions, no pharaoh claiming he strategically withdrew or achieved his objectives. Just silence. Because what do you say when your elite forces drown chasing slaves? The military impact was catastrophic. Losing an entire chariot division didn't just mean losing soldiers, it meant losing Egypt's power projection. Chariots were the ancient world's tanks, expensive, highly trained, irreplaceable. Each chariot required years to build, a team of craftsmen, and horses bred specifically for war. Each charioteer trained from childhood. Each unit represented a massive investment of resources and time, and Pharaoh had sent them all into the sea. Egypt's ability to control their empire depended on rapid response forces that could crush rebellions before they spread. Without those forces, the edges of their territory began to fray. Subject nations started to wonder if Egypt was still the unstoppable power they feared. But the real damage was psychological. Word spread across the ancient world. Traders carried the story. Refugees repeated it. Subject peoples whispered it in marketplaces and temples. Egypt, the empire that had dominated the region for centuries, had been humiliated by a nation of former slaves and a god they didn't understand. This wasn't a military defeat. This was a supernatural intervention that shattered the foundational belief of the ancient world, that Egypt's gods were supreme. The Israelites themselves were transformed. A terrified refugee column became a nation defined by this single moment. Every generation after would tell this story. Every crisis would be measured against it. If God could split the sea, what else was possible? The untold truth is this: the parting of the Red Sea wasn't just a miracle. It was a calculated demonstration of power designed to break Egypt's will and announce a new force in the ancient world. A force that didn't need chariots or infantry divisions. A force that could rewrite the rules of nature itself. Egypt never recovered its former dominance. The empire that had seemed eternal began a slow decline, and the nation that should have been annihilated walked free into history. One moment, one impossible event. One nation that should have been annihilated walked free while the world's greatest army drowned in the sea they thought they could cross. If this journey through ancient history has left you intrigued, make sure you explore the other stories on this channel. Subscribe for more high-intensity storytelling and leave a comment about which ancient battles you want to see next.